I still shaking killer's hand. Whoa. Take the plug off in the middle, man. Whoa. Spray the whole block, I don't give a damn.
Right around the time that cinemas are getting dumped on the side of the road and forced to make the walk of shame, 21 Savage and Metro Boomin are offering their own cinematic blockbuster experience, the ambitious sequel to Savage Mode, a landmark in the 2010s canon of Atlanta hip-hop. Knowing the weight of these names being pressed together, I was certainly excited to see just how number 2 would come out. For those not aware, 21 Savage has a cold, unflinching style of delivering his lines, deadpan like a cold killer, Chief Keefian with his numbness, and occasionally ad-libbing his verses with the word pussy. Often missed is how cartoonish and satirical his scene building is. In fact, on Savage Mode 2, the jokes are out. Every album rollout from 21 is followed up by some Twitter gag about how these raps make me want to get strapped in the Glock and shoot up the block. Bro, chill the fuck out. It's an album with a Drake feature. Savage Mode 1 is an album that I've come to enjoy more and more over time, the more chances that I get to marinate in its atmosphere. And while I do think Metro does most of the heavy lifting, while 21 is just sort of carpooling with, I find the whole experience delightfully suffocating, emotionally numbed by proximity to slaughter and codeine. Savage Mode 2 as a sequel is different in spirit, because 21 Savage seems to have a lot more presence this time. Metro also seems to have sweated over the right details in each instrumental to pump this with as much cinematic scope as possible, while keeping some of the beats classically southern. I think the result is a little bit overdone, honestly. I do appreciate the inclusion of those Memphis drum patterns and taking a defib to pen and pixel for the cover artwork. I don't see this sticking in my mind as uniquely as Sav Mode 1, because Sav Mode 2 tries so hard to the point where every move feels like a calculated homage, no less getting Morgan Freeman to narrate the interludes, which is easily the worst part of the entire album, and probably would have only been a big deal back in 2012, at least a time when we could convincingly plead ignorance about his actual views on BLM and Black History Month. I don't really know, man. Sav Mode 2 is pretty good overall despite some unimpressive tricks. The album is fun, funny, and well funded, but the second half is so indescript it may as well not even exist. I will laugh about 21 sneaking back into a rival's household to score some coochie, or appreciate the music video for Runnin' where he brings his Grammy back to hometown Atlanta, but I do think this whole thing could have felt a little bit less like a gimmick.
I've got anxiety.
When I was in primary school, the boys in the changing rooms tested the theory that the louder you yell, the harder your piss stream hits the urinal, allowing them to piss from massive distances. If you yell really fucking loud, you could hit the urinal wall from the other side of the bathroom. Anyways, this Idols album might be yelling as loud as it can, but at the end of the day, it's still piss. I'm not here to pat myself on the back and pretend I didn't like Idols this whole time. My very fond reviews for their first 2 albums still exist, so don't call me no hater. Idols as a punk band was so exciting at first because Brutalism aggressively led some fresh, radical narratives to cut through the bullshit of the current ones. Most notably, sincerity and compassion are not a weakness. Being a little bit better and bodying a conservative are not mutually exclusive. They dealt this out with quick-fire catchphrases, and this is how they've always done it. The words are very simple, but they explode off into different targets like shrapnel, and their instrumentals felt propulsive and vicious, chugging till the keg was empty, and now the keg is empty. Ultra Mono is Idols on autopilot, not leading that fresh narrative, but finding themselves lost in the current ones, and generating boring songs about anxiety or consent. Good topics, but done so half-assed it may as well have been printed onto a sheet of rice paper. They seem to believe now that what counts as addressing a topic is to yell the word again and again, after which they can take a rest stop, sort out their merch deals, and spend the rest of the day researching support acts. Their mission statement of sincerity and compassion is not a weakness has now been boiled down to the vague, unhelpful slogans of love will heal everything and kill them with kindness, making this the Jojo Rabbit equivalent of punk. Not the abrasive snark of brutalism, not the more pointed message of joy as an act of resistance, but Ultra Mono instead comes off vague, like I don't really know what they were trying to do, aside from water their guitar riffs down until their take on punk sounds better suited for a gig by Skeggs. When I think Idols, I think about how the verse on Samaritans imitates an army sergeant drill to satirize hypermask behavior. Or how that spine-chilling bridge on Mother slowly peels back the curtain to reveal that the addictive chorus motherfucker that you've been yelling along to the whole time is actually about sexual coercion and assault. On this album, Joe Talbot runs the weak-ass line, I have got anxiety, it has got the best of me. One might believe that the album at least had something musically different to say, with both David Yao and Kenny Beats on board, but its most off-kilter moment is actually Jamie Cullum playing piano at the start of track 5 for no fucking reason. I felt that something was majorly off once the Reptilia cover hit the web, but the biggest smack in the face is that after all that we've been through on this album, the last track simply cuts off abruptly, which just about sums up the whole experience. A record that simply couldn't be bothered to the point where it doesn't even have an ending. Now how stupid is that? This is the second NICOLAS JAAR album I'm reviewing from this year. The first was under the name Against All Logic, his house music superhero outfit. But this year's AAL album had a bit of a dark side to it, a release of pent-up aggression and angst seeking a chunk of drywall to punch out. I won't say that Cenizas, Nick JAAR's ambient album under his own name, is dark in the same angsty manner, but it is possessed by a different, more cerebral darkness, the kind that naps in the shadows of your psyche, doing skateboard kickflips around the half-pipe of sin and scandal. He describes this as an album of healing, the aftermath of going into isolation to escape the noise of the world, only to find himself haunted by the negativity within himself, hence these shards of sound piling up as the many tracks on Cenizas, the result of a meditative session gone horrendously wrong. Don't catch me mistaken, it's hushed, musing, and very arousing of the ear canal, but it's also influenced by anxiety and regret in a way that feels truly cursed. Your inner demons are inside you, and you can never truly hide from yourself. Cenizas is good as an immersive mood, but each little step of the way sort of varies in how well it absorbs me, like Minisid's makeup being the sounds of marbles dropping on the lino, hitting the senses like that ear popping near the end of a flight. I like that, but then you get Gocce with JAAR faffing around, smacking and sliding his hands around a piano, which is just not really cool to me anymore.
Don't give a F-U-C-K. I don't give an F-U-C-K.
I do believe the notion that these are recreations of internal feeling, but I suppose that's where the roadblock is, that I don't always get to connect to something so abstractly personal. That said, after sticking it through, it truly is satisfying to get to Garden near the end of the album, and hear a track that flushes out some of the gloaming with an actual melody. I have enjoyed JAAR's albums generally, but I do find myself booted out of the experience every time one of his albums does a little stylistic switcheroo on you, whether it's the annoyingly inconsistent Sirens or 2011 Space's Only Noise, which was ambient musique but very French with a little bit of serenity. Cenizas has its own little zigzags too, but I like that conceptually JAAR has stuck to a single mood, constructing something within that framework, and there are plenty of days, or nights rather, where only this kind of music would be appropriate. First off, I know that genre-wise this music counts as quite a few things, like metal, noise rock, sludge, punk rock. I could dive more specific with sick terms like crossover thrash and all of that, but I'm not really an authority on this type of music anyways, and I don't really want to look like the Adam Ragusa of this music shit, so I'll just leave that up to you Hesher folks. What I do know is that if you like caveman guitar jams, then Luminous Bodies will be so much fun. I feel like they really hit a good sweet spot between tongue-in-cheekness, shitting on the Beatles and recounting an expedition into the K-hole, but also having the mind's eye on the bigger picture, the unrest in the UK at large. I read briefly that the track title I Wish I Had a Window was inspired by horrendous living spaces overseen by cruel landlords. This frustration comes from a mindful place, stirring up some chaos fierce enough that you can laugh and not cry, but definitely shit yourself. Shout out to all the cavemen homies, by the way, repping all the way from Eurasia. Luminous Bodies bloody get it, by the way. They touch on all the sweet emotive releases that hardcore music gives you. It loves hardcore and it wants to give back, and that's why I love this shit. Whether it's that tough rock riff that pounds like backshots at the end of Choices, or the high-speed thrash bit in the middle of Sykes, the industrial grotesque of I Wish I Had a Window, or that 10-minute sludge finale gut reaction, which honestly isn't even that daunting a track length by the time that you're actually there. Fold your laundry to it or something, because it just goes on by so quick. In the words of YFN Lucci and P&B Rock around 3 years ago, every day we lit. Katie Day was already 3 for 3 after her surprise album drop last year, but MYDATA turns that shit to a nice square, a quadro spectacle, each segment bringing us a little bit further into her online haven. Day's music is predominantly about identity and the need to be fluid, shape-shifting, especially defying boundaries of gender. It really spoke to me on Solipsisters last year when she talked about abandoning your shell and having a soul that sings in higher octaves than her larynx would allow. Day's music is a vessel for her to explore identity, one that is more self-affirming and allows her to be more than just her shell. You are more than who you are. MYDATA feels like a sequel in the sense that identity is explored, but now in tandem with what the internet has enabled, a connection with those who are just like you, to reach out and ask somebody who understands you to be your choreographer, to long for intimacy but over distance, which seems impossible, but she still reaches out for it. Because of this, MYDATA is spacious, and you can really hear each piece of the song breathe. Keyboard noises are just plinkering and wiggling almost like ribbons of kelp. It's a hopeful resolution to Solipsisters. That album sounded lost, while MYDATA feels found. It's what it means to feel seen. The spaciousness, the patience, the coping with loneliness, the sense of time passing via the track titles, reminds me most distinctly of Miranda July's 2011 film The Future, the one with a talking cat named Paw Paw who delivers monologues every now and then, waiting for their future owners to come and adopt them. Each time one of these scenes plays out in the movie, it's like time's frozen.